You're listening to Copy Chief Radio. Get all the episodes and join the community at copychief.com.
Hey, welcome. It's Kev, and I'm here with Sue Rice, my great friend who lives a dream life of her own making in France. How are you, Sue?
I'm doing great. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks for making time because we're in very different time zones. But I have to tell you, you sent me your book, which thank you, and beautiful inscription in the front. I'm going to hold it up for people who see the video. First of all, the thing that struck me was how beautifully the cover is designed. This is a photograph taken by Gabby, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, my daughter. My daughter's a photographer. Yeah.
And it looks nothing like a business book, which I love. It just looks like something in the bookstore. I would stop and go, what is this? Looks like a novel. But this a Tiny Thunder, what is that? You're breaking all the rules here, Sue. There's no big promise in Tiny Thunder. I don't know what that is. But then it has this beautiful, elegant subhead tagline, irresistible messaging for an overwhelmed world, which is what this book is about. It teaches us how to tell metaphorical stories, but it also teaches us why those are the kind of stories that stick the most. I don't want to explain your whole book. I certainly want to hear your take on it because you've been doing this for many years with your clients. You're a copywriter. You work with big companies to get their messaging intimate and make it connect better, which is no easy task. And so I'll let you talk about your own book because I could talk about it for an hour straight. What made you write it and how did you approach it?
So the whole idea of a Tiny Thunder or metaphoric storytelling kind of came through all my writing. So I specialize in emails, although Tiny Thunder could be used for other types of copy. But anyone who's written thousands of emails can probably relate to this. But at a certain point, you start trying to figure out ways of making your emails more interesting, making them convert better and all of that. And I first went down the road that a lot of people go down, which is, kind of brand storytelling. I can remember I used to give my clients a little questionnaire so that they would talk about their lives and everything. But the problem with that, and it kind of worked, but first of all, a lot of people felt shy about sharing their personal lives, which I understand. But the other problem was it's a short runway.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's only so many times you can tell your brand story. There's only so many times you can tell about what your daughter did on some day or whatever it is, your dog or whatever your favorite personal story is.
Right.
So I started running out of ideas because a lot of my clients, we send several emails a day, right? I started toying around with this idea of, I said, well, why can't I take stories that are third-party stories that you hear about, stories that you find from films or books or whatever, and use them as ways to illustrate a value or a process or a pain point or a challenge. And I started doing this. I've been doing this for really, at least a decade. And it really worked really well. So I'm actually using stories that might have nothing to do with an industry.
Right.
I'll give you an example. So, I read the funniest story the other day, which is about, imagine that you want to talk about how difficult it is to make a decision. Okay. Which we can all relate to that. Well, you could say, are you having troubles making a decision? That's one way of writing the email, which is what most people do. Or you could say, you know what? I read a story the other day about how Steve Jobs and his wife took 8 years to decide on a couch. He had a real problem decision-making about furniture, apparently, right? But you're going to remember, and the lesson of that is, it can be really hard to make a decision. And then we can help you in that process, et cetera, right? But it's a much stronger way. You can either say, are you having troubles making decisions? Or you can tell the story about Steve Jobs. And the Steve Jobs method is a lot stronger.
Yeah. And we all know because we hear it all the time, and hopefully copywriters get to see it in action, that stories are king. And we kind of understand the reasons why. They're fun to write. They're fun to read when written well. And they have the most stick. We communicate in story. But you go so, I won't say deep because it's not laborsome. This book is such a breeze to read. Your writing is tremendous. I really cherished like reading this book. I never like wake up and go, I can't wait to get back to that business. This is kind of a business book, but it's a book for writers, I think. And for anybody who just wants to communicate better. You don't have to consider yourself a writer, but if you are a writer, you're going to just like cozy up and hug this book. But there's so many great quotes in here that I won't even be able to find. But I have marks, it underlines all through there's a quote from, maybe it's a Native American proverb or something. Those who tell the best stories rule the world.
Yeah. And of course, there's a actual physiological reason why stories,
right.
What happens to our brain is that our brain sort of crave stories. One of the things that I think we forget, because we try to rationalize what we do and create systems and all of that, which is fine. But the reality is stories touch us at an unconscious level that's really powerful. And that's why they stick.
Right.
But by taking stories that metaphorically explain something, whether it's your idea or your system or how you can help people, it's like a magical blend between two of the most powerful tools. Because on the one hand, you have the stories, which are really emotionally involving and they capture people's imagination. But on the other hand, you have metaphors, which are basically a metaphor. And I say it very loose terms, like it's sort of like a category, is that it compares two unlike things. So you put those two things together and it's just addictive, right? Because they're like, why the heck is she talking about Steve Jobs picking his couch? What does that have to do with me buying my shoes or whatever it is, right? It's sort of like, what I like about metaphors is it's like a joke. Who am I talking to about jokes?
But it's true.
But, it's sort of like this, the person who's making the metaphor and the other person on the other side that is unwrapping the metaphor, just like a joke. And if the metaphor is, they've heard it before, it falls really flat. But if it's a fresh comparison, it's irresistible. That's what's so great about it. And it like takes you out of the sales zone. People forget that you're actually trying to sell an idea or concept or a system or whatever it is, because they're so involved in the story on the one side and the metaphor on the other side. Those two things just make it.
Yeah, it's powerful.
It's like, it's brain candy.
And like you said, it literally is. And on page 48, you say, stories foster empathy. When we listen to a story, our brain releases a chemical called oxytocin, also known as the love hormone, which helps people to be more generous, charitable, and compassionate. And so all your best feelings and instincts as a human being are released when you hear a story. And Tiny Thunder, it can be 2 lines, very short. The one that I read and stuck with me and that I always repeat when I tell people about your book is the Muhammad Ali one. You remember that one? It's so great.
I love that story.
You want to tell it?
No, you tell it.
Okay. So Muhammad Ali is on a plane. He's there in first class and it's time to buckle up because the flight's going to take off and everybody's buckled up except for the champ. And so the flight attendant says, Mr. Ali, you need to buckle up. And he doesn't want to. And he looks at her and he says, Superman don't need no seatbelt. And she looks back at him and says, Superman don't need no plane.
It's so
and then I think you equated it to something about being tax prepared or something.
Yeah. Right? Basically, after I tell a story, I do a lesson in there. It was like sort of sometimes we need to abide by the rules.
Right.
And that includes when you do your taxes, and we can help you do that.
So good.
Or something like that. Right.
And it's so funny. You can see the moment happening. And I'm sure like even if it's a real story or a legend, but I'm sure Ali got a real chuckle out of it and buckled his damn seatbelt, And it also goes to show the power, again, like we talked about, of human connection in a moment where you can take somebody's metaphor that they're trying to be sort of, aggressive and cocky with and not push back on them, but use the same philosophy. It's kind of like the yes and in improv, right?
Yeah.
And it's just the most powerful way to make a point and have somebody just let down their defenses and agree with you. So
one point I would make, though, is that I use the word metaphor in a very kind of broad sense, right?
Yeah.
Not in like a literary sense. And the same goes with
Mhm.
the stories, because I think of that as like a little scene. It's not a full story, but it's like a little story snack. But that's how we talk, and that's how we
Yeah.
normally communicate, Kevin. It's like,
Mhm.
I know everyone talks about brand storytelling and the hero's journey, but you know what? We don't normally, like when you're at a dinner party, that's not how we talk. We talk about,
Right.
hear that story about Muhammad Ali.
Yeah,
It's
snippets,
crazy.
or something comes up in conversation. And that's when you feel so good that you have a story like that, because it's relevant to the open conversation you're in the room you're in, and you get to like drop that in. Everybody laughs and you can like drop back out. Like, if you say, do like that 3 times at a party, people are like, man, that guy was cool. Or she was really funny.
She is a funny girl.
Yeah. And you only said 3 things. It's great for introverts, just have some tiny thunder in your pocket.
That's funny. Yeah, I haven't thought about that as sort of date bait, but that could be another way that you could use it.
But to be interesting, yeah. I mean, if that's all you have, the jig will be up before too long. But
Look, I get it. I know there's so many communities. I'm doing air quotes, communities for entrepreneurs out there, all filled with their own version of overnight experts chirping at you from behind the screen. You got your Facebook groups, your clubhouse rooms, just experts galore. How often do you feel like you're being pinballed around from thing to thing and picking up a little bit, a little piece there? How much of that is actually making it into your brain and your fingers and your business and affecting your money? How many of these people are actually out there in the field getting their hands dirty and testing to find out what actually works and what flops? Well, in the Copy Chief community, a real community, you get shoulder to shoulder with the most active, successful marketers working in the trenches today, all while learning from industry legends who rarely teach anywhere else, if ever. Copy Chief is an amazing community, super newbie friendly. Also, you'll find, elite level marketers and copywriters in there. They're all working to become the best at their craft, get paid top dollar for their skills, stay ahead of the competition by keeping their finger on the pulse of what's working now. That's the X factor when you're backed up by a community and you can get any question you have answered by people who actually do this stuff and can tell you from real world experience what to do for your project, for your offer, for your funnel, for your clients. Man, you're unstoppable when you've got that kind of confidence. Go check us out at copychief.com/join. If you've never been a member, you're going to see what you've been missing and you're going to say, where has this been all my life? And if you've been a member in the past, I would invite you to come and check out all the new stuff. We've completely updated all the tech. So we're on brand new platforms. Everything is slick and smooth and easy to access. And it's never been better. Copychief.com/join. I'll look for you inside.
So let's broaden out just a second, because as we record this here in January 2023, Happy New Year to you. Everything in our industry has been focused on AI, ChatGPT, all the machine learning tools that everybody suddenly is like waking up to. The conversation has quickly evolved from, they're stupid, they'll never be us, to, okay, I get that I can actually use these things when I learn how to make me, if not a better, a more efficient writer. And they're realizing the tool is only a tool to help me get ideas and maybe form ideas. And I love it for research so far. I haven't asked it to write anything that I want to sit there and edit. I'd rather just write myself. But when we come up with story ideas, it's one thing you could do with that. But the key is take whatever information you're given, which is what you spend a lot of time in the book telling us where to find these stories, how to assemble them, how to have a log of them that you can pull out and use in the right circumstance. But they're nothing without the human at the hands of a human. That's when it becomes, because at the end of the day, it's all about connection. It's all about making that connection. So have you been following all the stuff about Chat GPT, or have you been sort of loving?
Absolutely. And I've always been really, really fascinated by AI, and I'm not intimidated by it. I'm interested in how we can use it.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I have noticed is that AI can't think metaphorically. It can dip into metaphors that have been used over and over again, but that's not what we're talking about here, right?
Right.
We're talking about fresh ways of presenting ideas using stories that are unrelated to the topic at hand, right? But that illustrate something.
Exactly.
So AI is great for research. I use it for research as well. But what it can't do, it can't, to date, it might change, but it certainly can't create tiny thunder, because it's hard for it to make those connections. So, I think there's nothing wrong with AI, but I think that people need to understand that. And I think it can do a pretty good job. I mean, but it can't do metaphoric storytelling.
Right. And not like you can. And you have to be the one to say, oh, I'd love to use a metaphoric story here. And maybe you can challenge it, prompt it. It'll give you something. But it's not the same as you consciously collecting these stories throughout your life or whenever you hear them. And you knowing I've got a whole sheet of these and I want to use one here, and going to select the one because you remember when you heard it, why it made you laugh, right? You have context for, and that's the personal part that, again, if we give that creative process completely over to a machine, it's going to feel like it's coming from a machine. And
it's going to feel flat, right?
Yeah.
But if you think about it, so the way I show in the book, I talk about it, it's like a 3-step process, right? So the first step is sort of a 2-part step where you decide what you want to communicate. Do you want to talk about a process? Do you want to talk about a pain point that you resolve? Do you want to talk about a challenge, a benefit, whatever? You decide on that, and then you find a story that will illustrate that, right? After you've found your story, the second step is to explain to the reader or the viewer, if you're doing a video, why you're telling this story, right?
Mm-hmm.
What the lesson behind the story is. And then you invite them into some kind of action, whether it's reading something or buying something or whatever it is. So in that first step where you're finding the story, you could probably use AI just to maybe instigate some idea, but about, where you could source the stories. But you're the one who needs to make all those connections, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
so
100%, right.
AI is like your helper, but you're leading it. But it could be a great tool for people just to find stories that they want to talk about.
Yeah. And again, it just has to start with your intention of, I'm going to want to tell a good story here. And what I love about using it for research is it allows me to think in real time, but sort of uninterrupted by a human collaborator who might go, oh, you know what? And then you go down a rabbit hole. And it's better than Google because Google gives you a flat screen of things you have to now dig through. And so with currently Chat GPT, you ask it a question, it gives you some information, you say, go deeper on that, and you get more specific. And then it leads your brain to something else you want to talk about. What am I really talking about here? I did this with the topic of negotiation the other day, right? Started with what parts of the world is negotiating a standard practice of purchasing things, right? Okay, it gives me a broad list. I get more granular. And then I start thinking about, okay, what are the basic tenets of a good negotiation, right? It gives me a list of those. And I'm like, wow, I'm allowing myself to follow my own thought process in real time. And then ultimately decide what needs to stay and what the real point of what I'm trying to write here is. Kind of the same way we do when we just start free form writing. Our brain kind of does the same thing, but we're just following our own words around.
I think that's a great tool, as long as you and your brain are the one in charge.
Exactly. So I want to give away your process, because I think this will only make people want the book more, because like I said, it's beautiful to read. It's super informative, but it's very instructive. And so the process you were talking about, step 1, choose your story. And you have, what's great is very much like a copywriter would, you go into, we need a value. And then you have all these categories. You break it down: power, achievement, hedonism, stimulation, self-direction, universalism, benevolence, tradition, conformity, security, right? Then we need an obstacle. Or you could choose, is it an obstacle? Is it a pain point? Is it a benefit? Is it a dream? Step 2 is the lesson. Again, like you said, why are you telling the story and what's the lesson in it? And then it is the invitation, which is, we would call like a call to action. And man, such a powerful, and again, this can be done in a couple hundred words if needed and make a huge impact. Again, this, I'm telling you, you're like, yes, this is what I've been doing for a decade, Kevin, and it's very effective. But that to me is that I just want to emphasize that, man, it's rare that somebody does this so well over years of practice, has the results to show, and then so elegantly shares it for anybody else who wants to use it. It's a generous act you've done for us here.
Thank
Sue.
you. Thank you. But I think that this is stealing words from Seth Godin, but I think generosity is the name of the game, right? And I think what I love about this process is that instead of interrupting the conversation with shouting and you need to buy and everything's going to go away in 30 seconds if you don't buy, if you don't press the button, it's like joining the conversation versus interrupting it. And what people don't get, and ironically, you're also making your point by talking about something that's not even related to what you're selling.
Right.
And it makes some people nervous, to be honest with you. I've had some clients who like, are you sure this will work? And there are people who say, oh, that worked really well. Well, let's go back to talking about the widget again.
Let's have another sale. Yeah.
And I get that. I've seen that, by the way, for ever since I've started my own little agency here, is that people get nervous about it. And I understand that but the thing about it is it really works.
Yeah.
Like really, really works. And you can also, integrate it with all these wonderful direct response principles that we know about, but it wraps it up. I think I said at the beginning of the book, it wraps it up in a Tiffany box, right?
Yeah.
So it just feels like it's a much more attractive package and it's fresh. Not that many people are doing it. So it feels non-template-y.
Right. That's right. It's very human.
And for the copywriter, it's much more fun, by the way.
Yeah.
It's a much more fun way to write.
100%. Yeah. And it's like you could do it all the time. And if people would only enjoy it more, they wouldn't go, oh God, Kev's doing another metaphorical story. We don't identify them that way as like we do like hackneyed marketing things. Oh, right. Kev has a deadline that
we know that. Yeah, we know that.
We know that trick.
We know about.
I wonder if the card will open tomorrow again, because there was a tech problem, but stories, again, they take us out of that. You also talk a little bit about right and left brain, appealing to people's emotional side rather than the logical side. And again, none of this is manipulation or trickery. It's how we communicate, as we pointed out in parties and life. Just observe the conversations you enjoy, or an exchange with a stranger. It's my favorite. You get a chuckle out of the cashier at the store, or you share a moment with somebody at a concert, a stranger. And it's usually these little stories.
I have this cute little, very French story. I have this, I think you probably see pictures of it on my Facebook feed, but I have this old car. It's a deux chevaux. It's like the classic French car. How I bought it is also a story in and of itself. I literally hailed some guy down in Paris. I said, can I buy your car?
Wow.
So cute. And he said, yeah. And I bought it for like $500 or something, but ages and ages ago. But now you cannot find them. And so I drive it. I don't drive it that often because it's like a 1958 or something. It's an old car. But when I drive it, there's a point to this story. So when I drive it and I park it in the middle of the village, all these men who are like 60 plus, it's like they see this car and it's magic. And I'm thinking, if I was ever going to sell to that group, that car is a metaphor for nostalgia. And I don't even have to say those words.
Yeah.
They just see it and they remember their childhood and what they did and who they were with. And so their metaphoric stories are everywhere. Right. And that's a great example. It's very
Right.
French example, but I
Yeah.
think that there's but that car has all these values to it. And you almost don't even have to talk about them.
Right.
They just showing the car admits those values, right?
Yeah. 100%. So true. And if you look at, that's why a lot of like Facebook groups start and things, there's one from my hometown, Lowell, Massachusetts. It's like, you're from Lowell right? And then it's just pictures of old signs and Elliot's hot dogs that in its original location, and people, it's that same nostalgia, but it's different when you see it in life, when you're not expecting it, right? And it rolls up into the village. But you're right. That's exactly the moment that we can create with these Tiny Thunder stories.
Right. We can create that connection.
Yeah. The connection.
Right.
And
that's not even what I wouldn't even call that a story. That's the thing that it's important. It's like a little vignette. It's a little something that has all these values attached to it and will explain what you're doing. It's a much better than, do you feel nostalgic?
I want to bring you back to a time and place when you.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have to say that. You just have to show them the car or the picture of Lowell or whatever it is.
Well, and think about us too. Like you pull up in that car, everybody stops what they're doing and looks and immediately has an emotional reaction. And then you get out of it. You're their new best friend. Oh, they want to talk to you. They have questions. Why do you
absolutely.
have this? I mean, you could spend the day.
It's unbelievable. It is unbelievable. So you have power.
You have their trust. They want to hear your stories.
Exactly.
I mean, boy, if we can get our audience there,
it's
which
like
is the
trust
point of
in
this,
a bottle, right?
Trust in a bottle. I love that. Yeah. That would have been a great alternative cover. Never as beautiful as this one, but a bottle of trust. That's exactly what this is. Sue, this has been a joy. You're amazing.
Thank you.
Proud to call you friend. And it just can't say enough about this book. I've been waving it around at people for a while on Instagram and stuff, and I'll continue to do so. And I've had people thank me already for recommending it, and they have the same reaction I do. So congratulations. I can't wait to see what you do next with it. I won't spill the beans, but I know you're working on some things behind the scenes where you can help people come up with these stories even quicker, which I will be first in line for that. So
thank you, Kevin. Great to talk to you.
Likewise. We'll do it again soon. Sue Rice, everybody. The book is Tiny Thunder, Irresistible Messaging for an Overwhelmed World. Should they get it through wherever they buy books? Or do you?
So they can get it on Amazon. They can also go to SueRice.com/Tiny Thunder. They can get digital audio version for a little bit less.
Okay, cool.
Private.
I'll put that in the intro and make sure we send it.
Yeah.
All right, Sue. Fantastic.
Anyway, thanks.
We'll do it again soon.
Hey, don't forget your goodies. Head over to copychief.com/copychiefradio to get some great free stuff to help you put the things you hear on the show into action for your business. copychief.com/CCR.